Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the first ever live edition of the 2K Corner 3 show. I'm usually a little bit more energetic, but we've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of questions circulating around this league selection process. Thankfully, I'm not alone today. I'm joined by, as a lot of you know, Thomas Lynch.
How's
Uh,
it going?
what's going on, Thomas? MPBA2k analyst, journalist. Does great work for them. And then we're also joined today by president and CEO of the Game House, the company I write and work for, Robert Haynes. He's got extensive experience in the esports industry, and he's going to provide an outside perspective. He's not very ingratiated into the community, so I wanted to have that perspective present on the call as well. Yeah, what's going on, Rob? Do you want to introduce yourself? They know what you sound like.
Yeah, no. I'm just excited to be on, to be able to talk about it. Like you said, I'm not overly uh, involved in the scene currently, but I have followed it relatively closely, as I do with as many sports and esports as I can. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to being able to give what I can to this conversation, as I've found it to be extraordinarily interesting, honestly.
I mean, there's certainly a lot to uncover. What's up, Thomas?
How's it going? Yeah, sorry, I just thought I should introduce myself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Go for it, bud.
So, I've done work with the MPBA, obviously, as Braxton already said, writing and making videos based on Pro-Am. So, I know a lot about Pro-Am, a lot about the players. So, that's what I'm hoping to bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. So if you're joining us, you've more than likely watched the video put out by Chalk, probably more than one time. I certainly did. I wanted to make sure that I understood fully. Uh, really made sure to look at all of his points. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start by going over his video. We're going to go section by section, talk about, where he has a point, where maybe there are some areas that are lacking in terms of evidence to support a quote unquote conspiracy or corruption. Um, After that, I have a little bit of news to get to. We're going to touch on the Ball Gamer article, and then we're just going to have a general discussion about what the league should do moving forward to make sure that either they save face and make this a really good experience moving forward for everyone. So yeah, let's get into it. Apart from his intro, the first thing he goes to is the statistical comparison as far as guys at certain positions not having incredible numbers, getting into the 250, and then showing other established players. I think the two he showed were J Money and Bear. Is that correct, Thomas?
Yeah, the two of
Okay.
them, and
Um,
himself, obviously.
right. And talking about how, like, yeah, there's no way that um, Thomas, since you know the players better than anyone on the panel, give us your impression overall. How did they do getting the right people into the 250, and then what do you think about that group of people who are left out?
I think they did a great job. Honestly, a lot of the players that I know in the Prime scene, they got in there. You know, the throwdown guys, Insanity, Moody, they all got in there. So a lot of top Prime players got in there, which is what I was hoping to see, really, because like the 2K League is mostly based on Pro-Am since it's 5v5. So the fact that I know a lot of them, that's good from my perspective, I think. And obviously, there's players that I don't know. I know Chalk touched on it in his video talking about fillers, but yeah, I don't know every single 2K player on the planet, so it makes sense that there's some there that I don't recognize.
I think if we're going to speak to those side by side comparisons, is there anything that on like a personal level, knowing how they interact in the community, getting in despite their really good stats?
Sorry, you completely cut out there. Could you repeat the question?
Oh no, yeah, it's okay. The guys that Chalk specifically talks about as far as getting cut out when he does those side by side comparisons, is there anything that you know about them sort of off the court, like in their social media or like their brand that they were starting to build? Is there anything that they sort of have in common or
Um, I would say I know Bear and Chalk are quite outspoken. They're not afraid to express their own opinions. J Money, I'm not particularly sure of. I don't think he has any well-known characteristics, but the two of them definitely, I'd just say they're not afraid to speak their minds.
and I mean, being outspoken isn't most of Chalk's periscopes. What he has to say, he is a very charismatic, likable guy. I do think that as far as being outspoken, there's a difference between being outspoken and then potentially like calling out and drawing negativity to other people. He didn't overtly do that, but there were instances of where he talked about that. So I want to know essentially like as far as how big of a role that played, because really the stats are undeniable. Have an answer as to why they got left off. That's why this whole thing has started. But I mean, being outspoken isn't necessarily a bad thing, but depending on what they've said during the course of their social medias and periscopes, they could have said something like calling out another player or really calling out the league. If they ever did that, I'm not really surprised, because I don't know how you can expect to get a job when you call out your potential employer. But Rob, is there, I know you talked about this is something that's never really happened in esports before, this sort of open competition. So what is your perspective on, you know, guys who are clearly...
I think I know where you're going with that question. You paused there for a second, but I mean, for me, calling out your employer is one of the worst things that you can do, or your potential employer. I mean, there are what 13 other teams that have still not jumped into the league, and so you know you may have been number 251, and by joining in and in White Chocolate's kind of um, decision making, or his ability to call or what he's doing right now, trying to potentially bring light in his mind to the situation is going to absolutely hurt you. And I can give perspective from from League of Legends, where uh, Dardoch is a certain player that really has had a lot of problems with this. And in the gaming community, toxicity is something that's very common. People calling people out. That's just the way things go. But um, until the you know until the job of you know big corporations and big sponsorships came into this, you couldn't necessarily, how do I put this? You could be toxic, but you weren't going to get penalized as much for it. Well, ever since the announcements for franchising and everything else came along, Dardoch has been on 3 different teams, and this is because his toxicity towards his players, coaches, owners. He's had a lot of problems, with this, and so he's been traded a lot. And so I think with the way that the branding is wanting to go, they're not going to want to. Um, they're not going to want to bring in people who are going to cause a rift right off the bat. But they could have been there, later for the other 13 teams that may come in. And right now they're only hurting themselves by, calling out the league and again their potential owners.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to be on record. I'm not accusing Chalk of doing anything.
Yeah.
These are just things that we were talking about as that could potentially hold someone back in this process. I actually appreciate he took the time to make the video and put out everything he had found. I mean, because if he didn't do that, there isn't really any substance to this debate. But I'm glad he did. He's given us things to talk about. Thomas, what were you going to jump in and say?
I was just going to say that I feel like through making the video, he's kind of hurt his chances for year 2. I know Rob touched on it there. He's hurt his chances for year 2 already. I mean, was it worth it, do you think?
And I don't know. That's a question for him. I don't know if I think in a Periscope he might have said, I'm not trying to be in the 2K League in the future, and that's fine. But I do want to say I appreciate what he did, because that actually gives it gives light to what potentially is going on. And there are some things that are really unexplainable, because either the league hasn't explained them or logically they're not connecting. So let's go to the second part where he's talking about marketability, and we kind of transitioned in that way, talking about how certain players weren't marketable if they didn't clean up language, images in their streams or in their social media. And then he proceeded to show screenshots of managers with less than desirable behavior on social media. I don't know if anyone, it took me a second before I watched the second are from 2016 in my notes. Yeah, both of them are from 2016.
Yeah.
And now it's important because that's before, and because I know Grant's history, we met him at League of Legends, Rob.
Yeah.
He wasn't even hired at Monumental Sports Entertainment until September of 2017. So holding that against him, I would call it a little petty. It does speak to the overall message is like, hey, if you want us to be squeaky clean, you should expect the same from your managers, especially the tweet with Roger with the use of the racial slur. That's a whole different discussion. But I mean, I think where that part of the argument falls short is where he didn't show players who made the 250 who have that kind of stuff out on record for people to see. I would think it would have been a stronger case if he shows a guy in 250 with that sort of. I do think the managers need to be accountable, but the extent to which he had to dig to find those, I don't think it's incredibly relevant. But the point is made.
Um, I'll jump in here, and this one is more of, and I understand why they said that, and I do agree on with the point that these things were from 2016. To me, this is more of a for everybody kind of thing. Like, going through and making sure that your social media, you have either a business one or kind of a fun one. A lot of people will come about with a newer Twitter account, to separate it so that these problems are not as as big of problems as they are. And right now, what's happening is yeah, he did some digging and he went and found it from 2016, but at the same time, you know, it's not supposed to be. These general managers do need to personify an image, right? They need to be the image of the 2K scene. And while it is a little, in my opinion, petty to go all the way back to before he was, uh, brought on, I do think that there should be that sort of accountability held,
I
and
agree.
they need to make sure that these general managers are carrying themselves the same way. And truthfully, the managers potentially and the league potentially made a huge mistake by not making more professional accounts. And so if the players are to be held to that, then it's not exactly wrong for him to go back and find those kinds of things at the same time, because you're leaving yourself open to that.
Thomas, do you want to jump in?
No, I was just gonna say I just agree with that.
Um, and I mean, if we're talking as far as what matters more, this is a players' league. No one's going to tune in to watch these managers, and they're not going to make money on sponsors because of a manager. So while it is important to not have that double standard, it's more important for the players to have that image so that the league as a whole will be successful, and that these players as individuals can have the sponsorship deals that they want to get and promote themselves. But no, I agree that there should be that kind of accountability going both ways, even if it is something that's as far removed as that. If they're going to hold the players to that standard, then the guys who are in the league in operation should be held to the same standard.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. The next category that you talked about was the application process, and given the league's announcement last night, we know a little bit more as far as the filter. It went from the 72,000 down to 1,000, 1,250, and your application wasn't reviewed unless you're in the top 1,000. And even then, not everyone got plays on their audio, or if there's a way you can tell that your application was viewed, people don't have that. As far as that application part of the argument, Rob, you brought up this point. I mean, what's the math if they were going to listen to all 72,000 audios for 2 minutes?
If each audio was 2 minutes long, they would have had to listen to audio that was equal to 100 days straight without stopping, or right around there.
Yeah,
And that's no excuse to the league for not listening to them, honestly, because I do think that, and there's something else that we'll touch on later, as to where I think there was a really big mistake from the very beginning personally, but I will say that these people did make these, and while I know Thomas will probably come up with this point too, but yeah, I mean, trying to listen to 100 straight days of audio for maybe there are 50 people who are making these decisions and who are needing to listen to these things. That's extraordinarily unrealistic, especially if the draft is supposed to be in what, like 2 or 3 weeks.
If they still want to have it in March, I mean,
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
a certain process. You might have. Did you hear me? Okay, bud.
Yeah, no, I heard you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry,
Oh
what
no,
did you
it's
say?
okay.
You could have.
Sometimes I feel like I'm cutting you off, or I'm talking. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, your screen keeps on freezing on me. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And then as far as the specific examples he brought up in screenshots, he brought up a couple people's SoundCloud accounts to which they posted the audio. From what I could see, one was user 123456789. The other one was Doom's. Then we have an unknown one where it's just a zoomed in version on the play button. And then the last one is Hank the Tank, who is a relatively well-known player in the community. He's a really good player. I mean, I know why he didn't get an audio play, because I actually remember doing this, Rob. We were on the phone. We were watching streams the very first night, and I was looking at Hank. I was watching, and then all of a sudden, I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was an argument with him and a teammate, and then all of a sudden he quit on the stream. And while it's not a crime to quit, it's not. He quit with a couple hundred people watching, and then on the first night, knowing people are going to be really plugged in, especially like the managers who are watching, that didn't set a good example. Now, I didn't watch all of his tape throughout the combine. I don't know if that quitting was a continual issue, but that's enough when there's 70,000 people. Someone is just as good as you or a little bit under your skill level, if they don't have to worry about that sort of dissension or attitude, they're going to pass on you.
Can I jump in here for a second on that one? Is that cool? All right. So
Oh,
the one thing that I will point out on this is that while I understand, quitting, dashing, all that stuff was later on called out. I have played video games for a long time in a competitive atmosphere, and quitting, there are many reasons that somebody may have quit. It may have been their power went out. What if somebody walked by and accidentally knocked out the power cord, or their internet went out, or, there was a storm and their power overall went out. So I think while it was bad that he did it on the first night of the stream, I think that if that really played that much into their decision, I can't even imagine like how that's possible, honestly. Unless if they were doing it on a consistent, regular basis to where they were quitting any game that they were losing, because they can, I'm sure, track those stats. That shouldn't really, hopefully, have played as much of a role.
yeah, I agree with that. I know Chuck brings up screenshots of people dashboarding. Oh, sorry.
And as far as like that, what you talked about, I don't think it should play that much of a role. But what people I think are forgetting, as far as when they consider someone's personality in this assessment, whether or not they're going to get an invite to the top 250 and then an invite to the 102, this is beyond. Everyone is really excited about all the living quarters that are being displayed on social media. So when I'm building a team, I have to think, can this person coexist with 5 other people in a house, in an apartment complex, all day, every day with their teammates? I mean, if you, for the 2K fans who are in college, like if you've ever had a roommate who you do not get along with, everything in your life is worse. Your studies are worse. Your relationship with your friends and family are worse because there's so much tension in a place where there shouldn't be that level of uncomfortability. So if I'm making a decision, not only am I paying this person 30 grand or 32 grand, they have to coexist with all the 5 other teammates. If I get the slightest idea that, he might be an issue 2-3 weeks in, he might be wearing thin on certain people, I can't take that risk. But I do understand your point. If it happened once, I don't think someone should be completely thrown out for that. If it happened to be a pattern or something like that,
Yeah.
that's totally different. But that's the approach they're taking. Like they're essentially building families that are going to live with each other and be around each other 24/7. So I think that's something that's getting overlooked in this process.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Moving on, we've got the combine play as far as, did they play ethically? Did they play the way they're supposed to? Or did they take advantage of the hacks that existed in the game? I don't. There isn't a way to track it unless, you're on the back end. But I just want to get your guys' opinion. Do you think that people who made the top 250 took advantage of the hacks and sort of either pulled the wool over the selection process for the 2K League, or do you think it didn't matter?
I feel like a lot of the players, like the sorry, I'm going off. Chalk mentioned the example of DevGoss. He used him twice in the video, saying how he dashboarded, and then a while later, Moody tweeted out saying that they weren't. He just got, like, his power went out in the middle of a match, and he didn't quit. He was forced to stop playing, basically. So, I mean, stuff like that can happen, and it may look from the outside like, oh, sure, he did. He was dashboarding, but it might not have happened. I mean, no one really knows the whole story. Like, we don't know every single circumstance.
Yeah, and also the idea of the glitch for the center holding B in the paint.
Yeah.
We can, short of watching games, were they taking advantage of this quote unquote hack? There's not a real way to address that unless we can see what Take Two and the NBA had on the back end to sort of find that process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have too much to add to that,
Nope.
honestly.
And then the last of the before we get to the screenshots and the messages, about the idea of fillers, the idea that, to make this appear to be legitimate, they added people who don't have any business being in the top 250 so that it's easy to get the players they quote unquote want into the 102.
You're cutting out hard, buddy. I don't know what you're asking right now.
You could say that again.
Thomas, you still there?
Yeah. We're still here. We
Can you hear
can
me,
hear
bud?
you, though. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna guess you can't. No big deal. From what I've seen, the quote people who are fillers. Can you hear me? I'm looking at your screen. It looks like you want to jump in. I don't know if you can hear me.
I mean, if you're asking if we have comments on the fillers, potential fillers, I am of the opinion that, I mean, there's always that possibility. Honestly, I'm not gonna say that that for sure happened, but I mean, if I remember correctly, the chance of somebody making it through this process into the top 250 was, I think we discussed it. It was a 0.34% chance. Is that right?
Yeah, 0.34%.
And then just to get even drafted from the very beginning is a 0.15% chance. Um, and I will say this. I mean, if I was a general manager, I would have already had people who I had been looking at before this process. I would already have a draft board of people who I'm interested in, and then I would go around looking at as many people as I could. I know Braxton and myself stayed on many different nights just looking around Twitch, trying to find people. I mean, I went to so many people who had me as their only person watching, and I'd watch an entire game, maybe two. I even still have notes of people who probably didn't make it, who I thought were pretty good. But to me, if I'd already had my draft board, right, then I would have been watching for players who I could take somebody off my draft board for, if that makes sense. And so I don't know if there are people who are fillers in that sense, or if there are people who legitimately were better than other people. But I would have to say that, I mean, for me, it all just comes down to there being 72,000 people to look through, and I don't know that the process was easy to, I guess, make that happen to get it down to 250. So I think it would be terrible if they wouldn't have already had at least a big board of 1,000 plus players that they were comfortable with before this all started. But that's how I would have done it.
And having a board, by the way, does not influence who's in the draft pool. I know that's a big thing. People are saying that the managers have their hands in this, like they completely control it. Guys, think about it this way. The NBA is pitching to the 30 owners, this is a good investment because we know how to run it. They are not pitching to the owners that we are going to hire 13, 16, 17 people who are going to help us run it. It's going to be decided by NBA and Take Two. That's how it's been the whole time. These managers are great as far as social media and as far as information, but as far as controlling who got in, they had zero control. The end is okay, and I know that we were trying to go through the video, but I'll just go ahead and go through this. I was able to talk to my source this morning. It was in reference to the Ball Gamer article and about how the selection process panned out. And the first thing I want to say is that everyone's criticizing them for running away and hiding. Guys, they're not allowed to talk about this issue right now. They're not allowed by their bosses, by the NBA, they are not allowed to talk about the issue on social media, okay? It's one company, one voice, one message. That's the right corporate public relations strategy, okay? So don't bang on them personally. I know I've heard people saying like, well, if I was being accused of something, I would come out and defend. Trust me, these guys want to get on and state their case as to why it's not their fault you didn't make it, how they have no control over this, okay? It is their bosses telling them they can't address the issue. But what I was able to learn is that the timeline that the Ball Gamer put out as far as the series of events that led up to the Styles controversy, that timeline is completely accurate as far as managers asking, had the email waves been finalized, the official responding, the Grant tweeting of, hey, everything's been finalized, check your emails. And then at 11:55, the Style message to Anthony. And then the timeline of Anthony responding to Styles. And as far as the gap, think about it this way. If the managers were really able to control whether or not someone got in, how did he get overlooked in the first place? If they already knew. And how about this? If they already knew he was in and wanted him in, why did it take 4.5 hours for him to get his email? And I know why. It's not because these managers send the email. It's because they had to communicate with the NBA league offices who have a ton of things on their plate to do this. Now, I'm sure they had a checklist like, all right, we've sent out the emails. Once they got word that, hey, some people might have gotten their confirmation emails or emails at all, they had to find time in the rest of their day to go back, make sure that the emails were properly sent, and then get them out. That's why there was such a delay. Now, if the managers controlled everything, why wasn't it fixed instantaneously? Because they don't, and it's because he wasn't added after the fact. Also of information, this happened to more than one player. The numbers put on Ball Gamer are 3 to 4. The numbers I got are 4 to 5, so I'm going to stick with 4. This happened to 4 players. It wasn't just Styles. Guys, please, if there's anything you want to say, jump in. I'm just trying to make sure that this news gets out before the stream's over or before people leave. Let me see. And then the other thing is that people are saying that he was added after the fact. That's not possible because there's a cap on 250. Think about it this way. If he was added after the fact, after 250 emails were sent out to people who got the confirmation, if he was added after the fact, they would have to do one of two things. They would have had to open the draft pool to be 251, 252, to however many people got the email late. or they would have had to take invites back from people who already got it to make space for them. He wasn't added after the fact. His relationship, as far as the conversation that happened on Friday with Anthony, that played zero role in him getting his email. That was just him reaching out saying he hadn't got one, and to say like, hey, sorry, man, I don't think I made it. Guys, is there anything you want to talk about or add to in that rambling right there?
I was just going to say that I know Styles and Anthony, I'm pretty sure they are acquainted before that. I think that presumably Anthony reached out to Styles as a courtesy, like as a friend, just to let him know, rather than to let him know like more sinister.
Yeah, and as far as that second screenshot where it's showing the conversation they had about, hey, I like your game, how old are you? That took place, I don't know the exact date, but I know for a fact that conversation took place before September 9th, 2017, months and months and months ago, before any of this was really decided, before any of the plans had come out, before a lot of these managers even got hired. So there is no way that you could tell me that someone had the foresight that far in advance to make sure that, hey, this one guy is going to get in the pool. That's not realistic. That's not how this works. What if something in life happened to where he had to give up playing, or he got sick, or he got injured? That's not an efficient way to run a business or to put a good product on the floor. And sorry, I'm going to give you guys a chance to talk because I've been talking nonstop.
I mean, I will say this, and it's been pointed out in the chat that, being insured by a manager, he shouldn't have been. From a business perspective, no, that should not happen. I'm sorry, but there's no reason for him to be going to a player saying, "Yo, man, I'm gonna make sure that this doesn't happen." I'm sorry, but that's not
100%.
how you do things.
Yeah, 100%.
There's no excuse there on that one. Like, that is absolutely not okay. And that, I mean, that, first off, I feel bad because I'm sure that Styles, those messages are getting out there because he sent it to White Chocolate not knowing how he was going to use it. So I think that's that I'm glad that it was shown in a sense, because it's good to potentially call this out. But like, I'm sorry, I just think that that there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse, and I don't think they can say that they, at least to some degree, while I don't think the managers had the exact decisions, it would be dumb of the league not to consider what they already know. I'm sorry. There's no way that the league does not consider that. That would just be dumb. Why would you even have the managers? Why would they have a draft board? Like, if they can't, like, if there are players that they've been watching who they like, who they would love to have on their team from the beginning, then, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't understand why we can say that there's no way that they had some influence. Again, and I'm not saying that they're lying, saying that they didn't, because ultimately they didn't have a decision. It's like, sitting in on a meeting, they ask for your opinion, but you don't get to make the decision. You don't get to vote on it. And that's what I feel like it is. But they did probably ask for their opinions, I would have to imagine. Now, I could be totally wrong, but why have managers at that point if you're not going to have opinions on players?
Well, the point to having the managers is to making sure that the respective teams who are involved have a leader in that franchise, and also that they can interact with the community and figure out, where does the 2K population exist in Miami or in New York?
But those are the people who are drafting people, though. They're the ones who are going to make the decision on who
they are going to make the ultimate decision, but they don't have a decision on who gets there. They ultimately have the decision on who they take. They don't have a say on who gets there, because the NBA is not going to let, as qualified as these managers are, the NBA is not going to let them determine their future and the success of this organization. And furthermore, like, the idea that all of these managers have a hand, it's completely not true, because first of all, the Celtics just hired their manager 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So do you mean the Celtics had? That means, and also the Kings still haven't hired a quote unquote manager for their team. I don't know what they're doing, just traditional Kings fashion. Let's just tank the whole first year.
All I'm
But
trying to
like,
say, Braxton, is that they may not have been the ones who sat there and put on the board the 250. But if you're going to tell me that they were not at least asked, who do you like? Who is somebody who we should watch for? Because 72,000 people, in my opinion, is way too many. Way too many for them to realistically, in a 2 month span, watch enough games, review enough applicants, do the whole thing. There had to be at least some people who were highlighted. That's all. That doesn't mean that they made the decisions, because they clearly didn't. But there's no way they didn't ask, so and so, hey, who do you like from before this process started? That's all.
and I think,
That's all I'm saying.
and I think that's fair, but that doesn't mean that he was retroactively added into the pool
No, I
because
agree
we
with
just
that.
discussed. Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Sorry, Thomas, we've been talking over you. What do you
Oh
think on
no,
the issue, man?
no, it's okay. I was just going to say, I know you mentioned their players that the managers previously knew. I know a few of them that knew the managers previously that aren't in the top 250. I know Champ's been to every 2K League event, I think. I'm almost certain it's every single one since the league was announced. And yet he's not in the top 250. So he knows them all, they all know him, and yet he's not there. And Zoomrock as well, he knows Anthony. He's been with him a few times. I remember seeing that on Twitter, but he's not in the top 250 either. So I feel like it's not all about that.
Yeah, and I know that as I've been trying to get the pulse of this, people are not a fan of how Champ is sort of reacting in light of this. Um, so I think that name we might have to remove from the conversation just because I mean the hate that people are talking like, hey, like don't feed me that positivity, like you're just being a mouthpiece for these guys, things like that. Especially given how close he is with them, I don't know if that's the best example to use, but it certainly does speak to your point. Like, well, if they loved him so much, why didn't he make the top 250? And he is a good player, but like if they loved him and he had previous relationships with the guys, like why isn't he in?
Yeah, that was what I just thought was worth bringing up.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it was absolutely worth bringing up.
I mean, is it worth just? I mean, am I able to make the point that I've talked to you about since the beginning, Braxton, or is that later on?
No, you can go ahead and bring it up
Okay.
because we're done with the chalk video. I've gotten to the news, so we'll do some general discussion. And I know you're monitoring the chat. Are there
Yeah.
questions that you get to?
Oh, there are plenty. Trust me, there are plenty. Which we thank you for everybody who's voicing your concerns. A lot of the reason we're not getting your questions now is because we wanted to wait till the end. But I mean, the elephant.
We'll do the last 10 minutes complete. The last 10 minutes, all questions. Okay, so we got 8 minutes to do discussion.
So I'm gonna start with this. The biggest flaw in this entire system, and Braxton and I discussed this literally on the first night, was having 72,000 people try out for something. That was a humongously terrible mistake. I'm sorry, but
Risk.
there's
I
no.
would say. I mean, that is a huge risk to take, and we're not through the woods yet. So we'll see if it ends up being a quote unquote mistake. But you're right; the risks are huge
Well,
with that kind of a pool.
it's more than just the risks. It is exactly what a lot of these people are talking about, though. Did they realistically have a chance? So why have them spend all of this time? And while I get what they did it for, because I mean, this is everybody, who's upset about this should at least be happy that they were given a chance, because you're not given a chance in any other sport or any other esport to do this, okay?
There's no precedent in history for
No,
this.
there's nothing that has ever been done like this before. So I give them kudos for at least, giving people a chance. But there is a reason why there are already top players, okay? And I have at least 2 or 3 friends who all wanted to do this whole process. And from the very beginning, if they would have asked me, I would have told them, you have nearly 0% chance of getting into this.
Mathematically, that is true.
Yeah, and it's not just mathematically, it's just the way it is. I'm sorry. It just is. So I'm not saying that they lied, because I think everybody realistically had a chance. And there are algorithms that they had to use to check things. Most people are super upset about points per game and rebounds. If we really want to talk about it here, I watched a lot of different games. The center position was so overpowered during every game that I watched for points and for rebounds. I mean, just stats in general. And it's not that they were even trying necessarily to do that, but they were just that overpowered that it didn't work in that way. They had to look at other things. So, I mean, having 72,000 people was a huge mistake, and then, I mean, trying to quantify it by the stats that were shown, people need to understand that that's not all they looked at, first off. And secondly, if you're going to tell me that points per game matter more than somebody maybe averaging a triple double a night, like if you're putting up 35 points a game and you're getting like 2 assists and 2 rebounds, I'm sorry, there's not a huge chance I'm gonna take you, because even if your shooting percentage is good, I bet you took 50 shots a game or something like that. You were probably a ball hog. So there's just a lot of problems with the process from the beginning. They should have also had cuts at earlier stages. They should have been taking people out before you get to 250 with any sort of process of doing a tryout. You have to have earlier cuts for people who you absolutely know there's no chance they're going to make it. So you make those cuts, and then you make it so that the games and the people are more competitive. And because they did not do that openly, I think they did a disservice to the people who played this game, and to even, I mean, and to everybody right now in the league. I mean, the managers are taking the heat for this, but I'm going to tell you, again, if they truly had no decision making in this, then, and how it was going to be run, then they're just becoming the scapegoats for fans, and I mean, truthfully, that's just not okay as well. So, I mean, that's kind of my thoughts at it. But
And that there was one issue that was brought up about as far as being able to see where you stand, like a leaderboard. I know that there were comparisons made to, well, for events earlier in 2K's history, they've done the leaderboard, but in my opinion, there's a problem with doing the leaderboard because it does a few things. If I know the top 10 at its every position are averaging this, and this, I now think I have to go get those numbers. And it's not about playing a game. It's, hey, how can I best record those numbers, because that's what everyone up on the leaderboard is doing. So that alters how you play the game. And second, if I'm playing with a guy who's top ranked at a different position, what incentive do I have to give him the ball? Like if I'm a point guard playing with the top center and I see what he's doing and I'm thinking, well, he's already solidified his spot as a top player, I'm going to freeze him out. I'm going to make sure that, I get mine, some of the other guys get theirs. Like he's already a top player. He doesn't need my help to make this work. So I think the idea of a leaderboard would have just really poisoned the well more than it was. Like people were already complaining about spacing, and these are legitimate complaints. Spacing, selfish play, not understanding how to play certain packages like pick and roll or like pick, roll, and pop, like people not understanding how to do that. Could you imagine if they literally just made it about recording stats?
yeah,
There's no way. That would have been a train wreck.
it would have been horrible. And yeah, you can't think that just because you're going to have a leaderboard that it's going to make it better. Because honestly, truthfully, if they had just done a leaderboard, these people who are complaining right now, you wouldn't have probably even been in the top 25. I'm sorry, you probably wouldn't have been. The people who are upset right now, it is very likely, again, because it's such a small percentage of people who they were going to take. What would have been the point? You would have, I mean, you wouldn't have played the game the right way. It would have ruined a lot of the way that things were working. It really would have. So I agree with you on that. Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah.
I'm taking up your space now.
Oh no, it's okay. No, I was just about to say. I know you mentioned that the fact that there was leaderboards in the 2K16 and 2K17 tournaments. In the 2K17 tournament, because teams knew where they stood, they knew. I'm pretty sure realistically, you can realize, oh, I'm not going to make it here, because it was only the top 3 teams per day. So if you're in one of the 1,000 spots, like a lot of teams had nothing to lose because they figured it's never going to happen. So I know people started the teams basically because they had nothing to lose. They started fouling, stopping the clock, calling timeouts, just doing stuff to try and hurt the other team's chances, especially because they knew they were near the top. I know Breeze from Team Witness, he made a video all about this. But basically, it was an issue that came about because there was a leaderboard and people could see, oh, these guys might get it, but you know what we should do? What would be funny? To stop the clock and try and hurt them.
Yeah, I mean that's an excellent point. That's not something I was even privy to, so I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, I know we're cutting it close. We want to get to questions. I guess we'll do an overall take from each of us. I'll just go ahead and go first. You know, I'm just disappointed because this league had really great prospects, and it still does. I think the players do deserve the transparency that they want. Now, I don't know if they're going to get it or how that would even work. But I believe that there's a transparency issue, but I don't think it was fixed from the beginning. There's absolutely no way it was, but I do think that the players deserve some transparency on how they got to, 72 to 1,000, 1,250. I think they do deserve that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty within the process. No one really knows what's going on. Might have fueled a lot of this controversy now that we're having.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, as you guys have already heard me say, I think having 72,000 players was a mistake without having cuts earlier on. After maybe a certain amount of games or after a certain amount of time. Um, I think that that was a huge mistake. I'm not gonna disagree with Braxton in the sense that I don't I really don't think there was technically a predetermined draft board, because if that had been the case, then they would have taken every single player who was in these top teams, um, and not given anybody a chance. And clearly they didn't take every single person who was in these top tier teams in the pro-am scene, because we've been hearing a lot from those kind of people who are really upset. But overall, the league does need to come out and do more than what they said. Not only just in the article, but also in their own official statement. It was extraordinarily vague, and I don't think that it was a service to the people who did put in the time. And I'm sorry, like I don't like saying that necessarily, because I do think that they did an incredible thing to even give people this chance in the first place. But if you want to start off with the fans in the right way, all these people who dedicated their time and efforts to making this happen, there needs to at least be something in response. It doesn't have to be a lot. It really doesn't. You don't have to sit there and explain a whole, every single thing. But you need to give more than just the vague, descriptions and things that were given. Because even for me, when I was reading that, I was like, okay, well, this does not give me very much. I don't really know why this matters, to be honest. But because those are things that I kind of already assumed.
All right. Thank you, guys. I want to make sure we get to as many questions as possible right now. My phone says 2:52. We're going to go till 3:05 with questions. So, Rob, you've been monitoring the chat. What do we got here?
So the first question we actually got from somebody on Twitter. They were asking, why are they deleting tweets if they're not guilty in a sense? Why are they, retracting these things? And I don't know exactly who they are, whether it's the NBA2k League or if it's managers or if it's people in general. But that's a question they have, and I'm gonna leave that one up to you too, because I don't know that.
Sure. Whoever put that tweet in there, please tweet at me, DM me. I'd like to know more about that situation. What was deleted? What were the nature of the tweets about? I mean, it's not a good look. There is it is possible, and this is what I believe. I believe there was no foul play, but this can be handled way, way better in terms of being transparent with the community. So I'd love to know more about what got deleted, the nature of the tweets, so that I can investigate it myself. But no, I absolutely think there are things that are questionable, and deleting tweets would be one of them. So I think, yeah, it's not a good look, and it's one of the things on the list that say, hey, we need more transparency.
I think the deleting might have been a reference to Roger Canada, the Mavericks manager. He deactivated his account. I'm 90% sure. I was listening to a podcast earlier from Xbox Needs to Chill, and he mentioned how he deactivated his account. So that might have been it. And I know he was featured in Chocolate's video for one of his tweets. So maybe that's it.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
All right.
that was the tweet that honestly upset me the most. If I'm being
Yeah.
honest, I feel like that was just. And again,
Yeah, because it's not.
he's not gonna be able to predict that he was gonna be a manager, you know. But again, that's why they needed to make professional accounts before this, so that they could uh, keep those kinds of things from happening. Because everybody makes mistakes. For all of you out there, by the way, who are saying like, I would never do such a thing, or how could they allow this? Like,
Hey,
let's be realistic. Every single one of us has made some sort of stupid tweet at some point.
Before I started working at Game House, I went back and deleted all my old stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's still stuff I've missed, but like I realized like, hey, if I have to be active on social media, I have to make sure I clean everything up. So like I am very it sucks because like I find things funny on Twitter, I find things interesting, but like they're inappropriate. I can't share them. And I mean that's something I have to be cognizant of. So everyone makes mistakes. I've clearly made mistakes. I have a tweet that is in the back of my mind. It was about the years ago about the Seahawks losing, and I tweeted something inappropriate, and I'm like, I had to make sure I went back and deleted that and a couple others. So yeah, everyone makes mistakes. But let's get to more questions.
Let's see what another one here is. Okay, so one person asked, please explain to us how 4 people outplay Styles, but the boat stopped for Styles. I think we kind of answered that one. But
it's just incorrect. I mean, like I explained, he cannot be added after the fact because there's a cap on the pool. Okay, so if he wasn't part of the 250, in order to add them, they either have to add another spot or take back someone's invite. Which if they took back someone's invite, that would be all over over Twitter in this community right now, and that didn't happen.
Well,
so
what they're wanting to know though is how. So somebody pointed out that people had witnessed his character of making fun of people's audios and other different things, and how apparently there are stats out there that show that there are at least 4 people who played better than he did, according to the stats that were tracked. How is it that they were able to decide on him? And I think, Thomas, this might be a better question for you because I know you know a lot more players than we do.
Well, I was just going to say, in reference to the whole process rather than just Styles' play, the ball gamer article, I know, Braxton, you've mentioned it a few times, it says that stats aren't the overriding factor, and I know, obviously, stats are important, how many points you average. You're not going to take someone who averages 2 points per game, but I saw a tweet earlier, Chris J. Will tweeted, and I have his permission to mention it, I asked him, but he said that he knows that 2K kept track of dribble count, jump shot timing, and block efficiency, so very detailed statistics. So I feel like maybe Styles performed better in those statistics that we can't see. And maybe that's why.
And I can only assume, this is only assuming, because I don't know anything about the algorithm. And to be honest, the managers don't know what the algorithm is either. That's way over their heads in terms of calculating that and putting that into the game. That's way over their heads as far as figuring out how to do that. But I mean, I can only imagine they had some form of PER or plus minus that they could evaluate players on. That's my thing. As far as the exact answer why 4 players who did better than him got passed up, I don't know, and I'm sorry, but like,
no, that's okay.
I do, for my information, like I don't know the exact answer. But like you, I want to know the answer, and I want the transparency, just like you guys, and you guys deserve it.
I got 2 more here. One of them is there's been a lot of communication about fraternizing right now, with the managers talking with potential players during the process, and they're kind of curious as to kind of why that was allowed, I guess, in a sense. And I mean, I will let you guys speak on this one as well.
Sure. I mean, as far as fraternizing that idea, I don't think that's something that the NBA potentially saw as a problem. It's clearly an issue. I personally wouldn't be for it, especially if I'm running the league. I mean, if I'm really trying to do this the right way, I want to make sure that there are certain activities, certain behaviors that the managers aren't doing. And if they weren't instructed, then it's no one's fault in particular. But if they were instructed and there were certain rules in place and they didn't follow them, then that has to be examined as well. But as far as fraternizing, I wouldn't be for it just because I don't know who's going to make it anyways. There's no point in me wasting my time really getting to know someone if they're not going to be in the 102 or the 250, which they don't control. Sorry, did that answer the question?
No, yeah, Thomas, what are your
Okay.
thoughts on that?
Well, I was just going to say, I know you mentioned it earlier with the Boston Celtics manager being appointed, but teams don't have in place, and I know a lot of managers. Some managers are more active in the community than others. So obviously, Anthony, he's been in there a long time. Roger, he's there as well. Some have more relations with the pro players, I know for a fact, but maybe other 2K players as well. But I don't think it's. I think it's more friendliness and just wanting to like get to know members of the community more than a business kind of thing. I don't think it's anything deeper than just getting to know them, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, while it could be that, I still think that's something that should be limited for this process.
Yeah, I will say this. I think all communication from the time the combine started till the draft pool was announced should have ended. And I feel bad for Anthony and for Styles because I don't think that obviously they intended for this to be an issue. They may have already just known each other. And again, I don't defend Anthony on what he said because again that's not good. But I will say this in the world of business, it's about who you know, right, and what you do to put yourself out there. And you know while it is well again it should not have been happening during the actual combine process. Anything before that was you can't control that. I mean that why should they not be able to talk to, whoever they want to before the combine started? So, I will say, mine is, I guess, kind of me taking the middle ground in the sense that it shouldn't have been done, but at the same time, you can't hold them accountable for what happened before. If it happened during, again, that shouldn't happen. Last question here. One. Well, actually, I guess this is probably worth answering. This is a quick one.
Okay.
Do you? And then I'll get to one that I think may have a longer discussion here.
Okay.
Somebody's asking is BLK Frank White. Do you think the process was rigged?
I think one question worth asking. Sorry. Sorry, Braxton, you go.
No, I mean, I didn't know if that was directed to one of us, but if it's an outright question, do we think it was rigged? My answer is no.
Yeah, I'm going to say no as well. I just wanted to say, in response to that, they'd have to have some sort of motive to rig it, and I don't know what the managers would be. If the managers are, if what he's implying is that it is rigged, I just want to know why before I agree or disagree. Obviously, I don't think it is. That's where I stand on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it was rigged necessarily. I do think that there are players
who are a little more skeptical of the process, and that's fine. I mean,
yeah,
it's
and I mean,
given what's come out, that's totally fine. I mean, I couldn't blame you if you're skeptical. Even with like my information, like there are still things that don't quite fill in the gaps for me. So
no, there needs to be questions asked because again, going from 72,000 to 250 players without any cuts beforehand. Again, I'm sorry, I come back to it though. If there had been cuts made beforehand, then there would be no doubt as to how things happened. But because there were not, I understand why people think it was. I personally do not think it was. Do I think that there were players who they were watching beforehand? Absolutely. That may have actually hurt some people. White Chocolate may be one of those people who actually was hurt because of what happened before the combine. That is absolutely a possibility. I don't know. I really don't. We aren't the ones sitting there talking, to these people about these kind of questions. But no, I don't think it was rigged.
What was the last one you said
The
warranted
last
some
one
discussion?
we're gonna get to, and for Cushman, we already answered why no leaderboards. So if you want to check that out from before, you can go back. We will be posting this on YouTube as well for you all to go listen to, and check back on. One person asked, this league should have had. It was BLK Frank White again, and I think this is a good question. This league should have had community people as managers for the 2K League. Roger's tweet comes from someone who doesn't know or care about 2K. Do you think the league should have hired all community members to run teams?
That's a great point.
It is a great point. I do think the idea of community representation is important, but guys, I don't know anyone who is really playing in the league who has a background in professional esports or professional content creating who also has an MBA degree. I mean, I love that idea. And I think there are ways that they could have community reps to make sure that, hey, we have this idea. Does this sound like something the community would like? I think that is a really good idea. But as far as having them being the complete manager of this team, there's no way the NBA owners would have gone for that. Now, I don't know what that application process would have looked like or who some of the most qualified members of this community are. I'm sure there are people who, okay, from a business perspective, from an esports knowledge perspective, yes, they could have been in the running, but I don't think that's simply a possibility because of the risk. That's too much risk for them to take on in that position.
I think, sorry, just to interrupt you there. I think it's like having community involvement is not a bad thing, but I feel like having them in the main role as the manager, as in being guy in charge at the top of the chain of command, would not maybe be the best idea if they've no other esports experience.
Rob, yeah, specifically with your knowledge of League, Overwatch, Call of Duty, CS:GO, what do you think about that idea?
I mean, I'm gonna say this: there were no real. If you're gonna tell me that there were 2K experts per se, even though they released a totally, from what I've heard, a different game for the combine and everything else, um, they needed people who knew basketball, community management, business, and the NBA and NBA 2K. And there are a lot of, I mean, why not choose community members to do that? They're gonna know the most. So, I get why that's a question. I do, because they are gonna know other people within the league. But if you're gonna tell me that there's any other league in any sport or esport that doesn't have the exact same thing, almost every single manager, almost every single coach, almost every single owner in any sport or esport comes from their community already, whether they were a community, manager, whether they were a player, whether they were, a coach, whatever it may be, they all come from that. So I'm sorry, but I mean, yeah, you have to hire community members, because otherwise you're hiring people who have no idea what the hell they're doing at all. Like literally
Well,
zero idea what they're doing.
community members, that doesn't specifically mean people who are in this 2K community top players. That's not.
No,
I don't
yeah.
think that's not okay, because this is beyond 2K. It's an esport. So if you have a background in team esports and running teams and creating content, that's what all these guys have.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what makes them there. So I mean, as far as having like top players, like well-known personalities, it's too much of a risk. I mean, I don't know how many players could get on right now and go talk to a sponsor at IBM and tell them why, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity for your brand beyond the exposure visibly, but monetarily, why it's going to be a good investment. That's part of my job for the Game House, and we're still struggling to do that. So I can't imagine people being able to do that on a whim.
Well, and you got to remember this too, and I don't think most of you all know this, but there are a lot of these guys who are doing one, like this by themselves. Some of these guys,
one person running the entire show,
have zero support, other than, I mean, obviously they're getting support from the Pacers or whoever, the Celtics or the Wizards or whatever. But I'm sorry, I just like, these guys are doing a lot of this without any help. So, or with very minimal help right now. So I think that they're doing, I truthfully, for the ones that I have seen, and I'm not as ingrained in this society or this community as everybody else is, but from what I have watched and seen over the last 2 months, a lot of these guys are doing a great job, or the best job that they can do with the limited stuff that happens. Most of these things that are happening are not the manager's faults.
And they're being blamed because they're the ones who are active in the community. They're the ones who the players know and ask questions to, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
But as far as the blame, this is not something you can place at the feet of the managers and be like, hey, explain yourself. This is an NBA question that they're going to have to answer. And that's why, like, I tried to get a comment yesterday, and I was referred to, hey, all comments need to be referred to the NBA offices.
Yeah.
This is an NBA issue. It's not a person. It's not a singular person issue. This is an NBA issue.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, there's actually one other question that just came up that I think is pretty good.
I'm all right.
You guys are willing to stay on for a few more minutes?
No problem.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you think the future scouting from amateur cash tournaments like previous years is a better option, maybe, have more with smaller prize pools instead of the combine, so more players have an opportunity to get noticed on a high level that resembles playing professionally. If you guys don't mind, I would love to start on this one actually.
Go for it.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
I'm going to say that I think absolutely that is a better shot because truthfully, when I was trying to even sift through players on Twitch, it was like impossible, truly,
It's hard,
to
man.
know because not only was it like that people didn't make their accounts on Twitch the same as maybe on Twitter or something else. Like
Or
they
their
were like,
gamer tag, like,
yeah, their gamer
yeah.
tags. Like I had no idea who was who. So I'm sorry, but like you didn't make it easy for me to find you. But if you're able to do these tournaments, as in other esports, this is the way that they do it too. There's never been a combine before, so y'all should be really happy that there was one because even if you had I'm not gonna say if you had played your ass off that you would have gotten in, but you at least would have had a better shot than ever before if this combine wouldn't have happened. But for the people who were going into tournaments, that's how it all works. Honestly, I mean, every single esport is due to this. I've covered League of Legends a lot. I've owned an amateur League of Legends team at one point. I've talked to plenty of players.
You
A lot of
coach.
yeah,
You
I've
coach League
coached.
of Legends too.
Yeah, I've coached it all too, and I can tell you that um, it's more than just the ladder, the rankings for players in League of Legends and whatnot. Zenith Esports, for example, is an amateur team that has actually had, I think, at least 5 or 6 previous players go on to play in the LCS currently. And it's because they're just known as one of the best amateur teams in the world, at least North America. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think that would be a great way to do it. And I think that they will have another combine, but they'll definitely, I think,
The process will
the
get better. It
process
will
will be better
change.
because I don't know how many are going to jump in next year, but I would guess at least 3 or 4 teams jump in next year, if not the rest, honestly.
I mean,
And
they were 3 teams that tried to make it in this year.
at
That's
yeah,
why it's the weird seven. That's why it's the weird number of 17. Three
exactly.
teams would have gotten you to 20. So like they were teams who wanted. There are teams who are absolutely going to pick up next season.
Yeah, so to
Yeah.
end my statement on this, there are going to be more chances. And so, if you all are worried about all these other problems that are going on right now, not only are they going to fix them next year, so you got to be forgiving in that sense because they're going to fix them, but not only with that fixing being better for them, honestly, it's going to be better for you guys. Like, you guys are calling out all these people and doing all this stuff right now. When you have another chance in 12 months, more than likely, I'm not going to say that's going to for sure happen, but it is likely that you're going to have another chance in 12 months to try out again and have a better process and a better understanding of what they're looking for because you will have just watched the entire first season of how the league was structured and what they wanted. So, I mean, that's kind of my thoughts on it. Thomas, we'll let you get in here next. I know you looked like you were ready to jump in.
I just wanted to mention it. I know obviously it might be a bit of self-promotion because Braxton mentioned that I've worked with the MPBA before, but the MPBA, they do money tournaments and mostly top prime players. I don't know if you've seen it, but certainly I have a lot of people in the top 250 pool that are considered top players in the community have played previously in the MPBA. And even if not the MPBA, the WR leagues. There's lots of different prime leagues that a lot of the top players have played in. Now look at them, they're close to getting drafted. They're closer than they were before. So I know there was talk about before maybe the MPBA having some sort of partnership, maybe like the NBA League, similar to that. But I feel like a money league similar to the MPBA would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you guys covered it. No, I agree. I think especially Rob, when you bring up that's the formula that other esports are using, that's something they're going to take into account moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, at least from my end, we're done with questions. Braxton, Thomas,
Okay.
do you guys have any closing statements? I guess.
No, I'm
I
good.
would say this whole thing's going to get posted on YouTube tomorrow. I'll make sure that the link goes out. If you guys missed anything, you can watch the beginning. I would say if there's anything,
Oh, damn it.
they're more than likely going to address it because they need you guys. Even if you don't make it, like they keep that in the back of your mind, like they need you, and they're ultimately going to do what is best for this community. And I know it doesn't seem like it right now, and you guys have reason to think it's not going to be, and that's fine. Let them prove to you that, hey, you guys are our top priority, and let them show you that, yes, we are going to put to bed all of the allegations. I'm going to tell you how to feel. If you're upset, man, be upset, because I would be upset too. I'm disappointed right now too, because this isn't what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Thomas and I were going to do, like, we can't talk about anything other than this because this is too important about the players who are there. So that's what I have to say. They need you guys. That's all I'm going to say.
And I can tell you personally, there are gonna be other opportunities for people out there, even as not as a player. And I can tell you that we may be hiring for NBA 2K type things in the future, and we check for things like this when we're hiring as well. So the biggest thing, and I'm not gonna say go delete stuff or anything like that, but I'm gonna say have your anger and everything put out this weekend. Get it done, all right? Because I understand your frustration. Not only did you just not get into something that, to be fair again, you only had a 0.3, what was it, 5 chance of getting in from the beginning?
Rounded up 0.35.
Yeah, rounded up 0.35% chance of getting into in the first place, which is actually kind of normal for, the percentage of even becoming an NBA player professionally, I would think. But, you guys get it all out now, but you all should be ready to apologize / not even apologize, but understand that they are going to make things better. You are doing a good thing and calling this out, and they are taking
100%.
notice. They are
100%.
taking notice. I promise you, they're taking notice. And I don't know personally. I am not, like, you can go look at my Twitter. I have not had a single conversation with any of these GMs, man. I'll tweet at them, and they still don't, like or retweet any of my stuff.
They still don't ask you.
So, I have no skin in this game in that regard. I'm just telling you guys this as, as somebody who, I'm excited about this game. I'm excited about the people who are in it. Because I do follow a lot of them on Twitter, and I like a lot of these guys personally, at least from Twitter. And then, through what Braxton and I discuss. We've had a chance even to meet Thomas through it. So this is a great community that is growing. And you guys need to make sure that if you want to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form, then you should think about that going forward. As a reminder, you guys can follow all of us. You can check the Twitter at the Game House. And you can see all of our, accounts. If you want to message us and ask us questions, I'm not going to speak for the two of you, but I'm more than happy to answer.
Yeah, I got a DM during this call right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to answer it on air,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm going to look into it. I'll see what happened. I'm going to see what I can help the person out with.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Me as well. DM me if you have any questions or anything.
All right, Braxton, you take us out. This is your show, man. I just was helping with the questions.
Hey, no, I appreciate it. Rob, thank you so much. Thomas, being halfway across the world, I don't even know what time it is over there. Thank you for joining us, making time. Guys, thank you for joining us, putting up with the technical difficulties. This is the 2K Corner 3 show. Thank you, guys. We'll be back.